Michael was in the house for Game 4, and he joins us now with a look at tonight's pivotal elimination game for the 76ers. And, Mike, you were in the house for all of the home playoff games, both of the games in this series, and you look at Game 3, that heartbreaking loss, the way they lost that game. To be able to get off the mat and come back with a win, do you feel pretty good that maybe that they have figured some things out, got their sea legs? They didn't have a lot of experience in these playoffs, and I think a lot of people thought that was part of the reason why they were losing some of these games. So are they learning enough on the fly to keep this thing going?
I think you have to feel pretty good about it, Mike. I mean, you look at the other game that aired right after that Sixers game, the Toronto Raptors-Cavs game on Saturday night, and you saw a team that basically gave up after being down 3-0 in the Raptors. And that's a team, comprised of veteran guys. They'd been to the playoffs. They'd been to the semis, the conference finals. And then the Sixers, basically did the exact opposite. Brett Brown went into his playbook, started TJ, really, kind of took a shot there. And the team showed a lot of fight, for a young team to have their backs against the wall like that. The common refrain is that they don't, they're too young, they don't know better. And maybe that's the case, but the vibe that I've gotten from being around the team is that they genuinely believe that they can pull this comeback off and be the first team to come back ever from being down 3-0. Now, I mean, it's going to be difficult. It's going to require near perfect basketball. But I think, if any team is going to do it, there's, reason to feel optimistic about this group.
Mike, I want to play a bite from Jim Lynam on yesterday's show, and then I want to get your reaction afterwards. Take a listen.
I love Joel Embiid posting up, but we're getting a little too much of that. That's not who this team is. Give a guy a ball, get out of his road, let him beat down his man. No, that's not who they are all year long. That's not what made them as good as they were at the end of the season and in the Miami series. I think they took a step back trying to be who they've been. They got a lot of good basketball players tonight. They had tremendous balance.
Your thoughts on that? Do you want to see Embiid posting up all night like Game 3, or do you want to see him more freelance like he was for most of the season?
I think that's a good point that Jim made there, Mike, and I do think that they were a little over-reliant on Embiid post-ups, and especially he seemed to, I think it might be a result of the tougher playoff defense, but when he's receiving the ball in the post during these games, he seems a little bit less reluctant to pass out. He seems a little bit more like tunnel vision-y and going straight for the basket rather than looking for some of the guys that are cutting or the shooters than he did throughout the year. I think it's a good option to have when the offense is not, flowing well, when Ben is struggling. But, to what Jim was alluding to, this Sixers team really looked its best throughout the season when they were pushing the pace, getting shots up quickly, spreading the ball around the perimeter and getting up and down the floor. And you don't see that as much when they're banging down low in the post with Joel. So I think if the team's going to play to its best, you want to see them getting out on the floor and maybe using Joel post-ups as a secondary option for when the Boston scores and you have to run a half-court offense or you need a bucket late in the shot clock. But overall, I think you need to see, the more kind of up and down fluid style of play that they did throughout that 17-game winning streak.
So I'll ask you a question we were debating earlier in the show. Who likes to post up more, Philly or Boston? Does Boston say, I want you to post Joel Embiid up? Does that play into Boston's hands?
I think so, a little bit. They made it pretty clear at the beginning of this series that they were going to focus on the shooters, try to take away some of the outside shots and not let, a lot of the peripheral guys on the Sixers get going, Marco, JJ, Dario, some of those guys. So I think that, if you're pounding into Joel and he's looking to score every time, by default, that's going to take some of those other guys a little bit out of rhythm and make the job on Boston's defense a little bit easier. With that being said, Boston does not have any single player that can stop Embiid one-on-one, so it's not something you want to go away from totally. But I think it does let the defense off the hook a little bit in this situation if you just repeatedly go down low.
Do you think Baines and Horford have, though, stopped Embiid one-on-one? I mean, isn't that been part of the problem, is that they're not doubling him because those guys have been able to stop him one-on-one or at least slow him down?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, he's still been able to be productive in his own way, but they've done, a decent job. You obviously can think of a few plays where Horford particularly was able to block Embiid or get the best of him. And by not doubling, they've been able to stay clean on the shooters, which obviously gave the Sixers problems throughout this series. But, I think if I'm going into this game and I'm Brett Brown, I'm looking to get JJ involved early. I'm looking to get Dario involved early, and then I'm looking to establish Embiid in the post. But that's not the priority for me going into this game.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain, 97.3, ESPN.com, at @TheRealMikeKB on Twitter. What did T.J. McConnell add that they were lacking in Game 4?
I think just everything that the people that have watched this team all season, like yourself, really just know what he brings to the floor. It's really kind of tough to define without using the cliches. I guess a spark is a good way to do it, but he's the one guy that you can see on this team that goes, he doesn't mind defending, picking up Terry Rozier 94 feet. He doesn't mind, hiking his shorts up and getting out past the 3-point line to pick up the point guard. Just little things like that, combined with a confidence that he had on the offensive end in Game 4, where he felt like it at least seemed like he felt like he could get to the rim at will and make plays either, with his own hand or dishing it off to somebody else. And that's a spark that the team has benefited from in spurts throughout the season. But this was, obviously in a much bigger dose with him in the starting role.
I want you to listen to this comparison from Jim Lynam of what TJ added to the team defensively. Michael, take a listen.
But I'm going to tell you, I get annoyed because TJ doesn't get the credit he deserves. I said, I'm going to tell you who I compare him to defensively. And Cheeks started laughing because he knew where I was going. He is Maurice Cheeks defensively. That's who he is. Cheeks, that's what put Cheeks in this league, and one of the reasons that Cheeks is in the Hall of Fame. And if I ask you, you tell me who McConnell reminds you of defensively. That's how good he is at the defensive end. You think it was a mistake that all of a sudden Terry Rozier decided to revert and score 2 field goals instead of 26 points?
Pretty strong statements called him Mo Cheeks, but if he is Mo Cheeks, he has Mo Cheeks would add a dimension that this team was lacking, an on-the-ball defender with quick hands.
Absolutely, and you heard a lot about TJ on the offensive end and the energy, but as Jim pointed out, I think the defense that he played on Terry Rozier, who had been just a thorn in the Sixers' side all the first 3 games, for TJ to come out and really shut him down, as Jim, referenced there. I think he had 2 points when he was guarded by TJ, 11 total. It was definitely a down game, and just to have that, a guy that can bring that intensity right from the beginning is in a completely different dimension that the Sixers didn't have. And for TJ to bring that after, kind of losing minutes and losing his spot late in the season when Markelle came back, for him to still have this in him and to be able to come in and deliver in such a big level when called upon, it just says a lot about him as a player on the team. And Jim is right. I think that he might not get all the credit that he probably really deserves.
Do you think you're going to see more of the same and see a lot of TJ tonight? And also, what's your thoughts about the best 5 for the Sixers on the floor to create matchup problems for the Celtics?
Yeah, I think you have to go with TJ again for heavy minutes tonight, just based off of the results from Game 4. With that being said, obviously the adjustments and the adjustments to the adjustments being, what Brett does to counteract whatever Brad does to kind of slow TJ down after Game 4, I think will be, the story of this game, really. It's definitely going to be a chess match in terms of the coaching showdown. But in terms of creating the mismatches on the floor, I think that the Sixers really, Boston has such an ability to switch multiple positions on the wings. I think that the Sixers' best shot really is to go pretty small outside of Joel. Obviously TJ is going to be out there. Ben, probably JJ, and Dario is the lineup that I felt did a lot of damage in Game 4 to extend the series. They established Dario really early in that game. He finished with 26 points, which was huge for the team to get kind of a boost from someone other than Embiid and Simmons. So I would look to a lineup like that and to establish some of those peripheral guys again early. I think getting them going and getting their confidence flowing early will be a big difference for the Sixers tonight.
And you said you like JJ. I find it interesting because he had a kind of an off game, and shooters can be really streaky. I think he's going to come out tonight looking to establish and be aggressive, and also with Ben having a really bad game last time in Boston. I look for both of those guys to really probably be the guys that are setting the tempo.
Well, and the big thing in this that you just mentioned, Bill, is the Sixers, none of them have shot well in this. There's not really been one guy who has shot well in this series. And I guess if you're the Sixers, you have to feel pretty good that at some point the guys who shot you here one of them has to get hot.
Yeah, absolutely. And you would think that if you're going to trust anyone, it's probably going to be JJ out of that group. And even when he's not knocking them down, I mean, granted, he's made, turnovers are a separate story, but just the fact that the defense has to respect him and what he can do in a pick and roll or setting down screens or in an offense, just the attention that he commands is, a pretty important aspect of what the Sixers do on the offensive end. So, if he can connect like he did in game 2, or game 3, game 2, in Boston when he came out, really scorching from the beginning and set the tone, I would look for something like that. And the same with Ben Simmons. A little bit of concern on my end that Ben might try to be, a little bit too aggressive almost in reference to, you said that, he had a rough game last time in Boston. And I felt like a little bit in game 4, there were certain times where he forced the issue a little bit, almost trying to show that he's not afraid of the moment, which is fine. But you just worry that in an away environment, I don't want to see him try to kind of prove everyone wrong in one play rather than letting the game come to him.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. Sixers at Celtics tonight, 8 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. And I think, Michael, that in this series, see if you agree, I think the Sixers defense has let them down, and that was the key reason why they won Game 4. They played better defense. They switched some things up. They still didn't shoot the ball all that well and were able to win that game. But I think it came from their defense was why they were able to win the game.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Mike, and that goes right back to what we were talking to about T.J. McConnell. On the defensive end, the job he was able to do on Terry Rozier from the start, by him starting the game, I thought really set the tone for the team defensively by limiting, really Rozier's penetration, which was an issue early on, and in turn led to, baskets down low for Horford and Baines, perimeter buckets for Tatum and Smart and Brown. So I thought that really TJ was the kind of the catalyst for that defensive surge. But I absolutely agree. The Sixers are a team all season. Brett, has said over and over again that they're a defense-first team and that they generate, their offense through their defense. They're able to get out on the break when they get to create turnovers, create stops, defensive rebounds. So, yeah, it all comes down to defense for this team in my mind, and I would look to, I would assume that they'll try to get off to a similar start on the defensive end tonight.
What would concern you about the adjustment that Boston will make to McConnell that might neglect his energy and neglect the intensity that he brought to that game? What would concern you that they might do to counter? Because obviously he wasn't in their game plan to play 39 minutes.
No, absolutely not. They were certainly not expecting that. And Brad Stevens, as we all know, is really good at these in-series adjustments. So it worries me a little bit that we could see some of the other players on Boston being tasked with the playmaking and offensive initiation a lot more, whether that be, running the offense through the low post through Horford, or whether Tatum is kind of a guy that serves as kind of a point forward and runs the offense through him. And, TJ would obviously have much more trouble guarding a guy like Tatum on the perimeter. So I could see Brad kind of taking the ball out of Terry's hands a little bit, having him play off ball a little bit more, which would in turn limit what TJ is able to do. And then just going at him on the offensive end, trying to get him in switches on some bigger guys, or get him in pick and rolls where he's stuck out on the perimeter trying to defend a Tatum or a Jaylen Brown, whereas, as good as TJ is, there's certain matchups just physically that are going to be tough for him. So I would really look for Brad to kind of exploit those to, the best that he can.
MKB's with us here, Michael Kaskey-Blomain.
Yeah, it's just something I was checking out. We were talking about the percentage. So this is interesting. On the season, the Sixers shot 42% from the floor, not overall, at home. On the road, they shot 44.7%. Thus far against Boston, they're at 41.3%. So not that bad, not much difference from their season. But in 3 points, they were averaging right around 33%, 34%, and right now they're only shooting 29%.
Yeah, the 3-point shot has killed them, Mike.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
On both sides, by the way. Boston's ability to hit them and their inability to answer.
Yeah, and I don't think that's something that anyone really expected coming into this series. I think, especially after the offensive display that the Sixers put on in the first round, I think that's really been a telltale sign. That was a great stat from Bill there. Just if they had been able to shoot throughout at the average percentage that they shot throughout the season and in the first round, you would think at least one of those first 3 games, just statistically would have turned in their favor, and they would have, been 2-2 rather than 3-1. But, you hope, I guess, at this point, like you said, that they're not going to divert too much from what they've done throughout the season. Obviously, there'll be some wrinkles, but eventually you just have to hope that some of those looks, start falling like they did all year.
Woj was on with Le Batard this afternoon, and he said a lot of times, in referencing can a team come back 3-0, typically no, it never happens. But he said most of those times the team up 3-0, they're up 3-0 because they're significantly better. You see a lot of first-round series that are 3-0, and then the team just gets swept out or whatever. Do we feel that's the case here, that Boston is the significantly better team?
I certainly don't think so. I'm sure, obviously, some Boston fans would say that I have a Philly bias, but I mean, especially when you include the injuries that they're dealing with. When we're talking about strictly the team that they have on the floor right now, I would say no, that they're not the better team. I think the Sixers, and I would say most would agree, the Sixers have the 2 best players and the individual players in the series, and Embiid and Simmons. The Celtics might go a little bit deeper. But, this is, like you said, this is a series that's been really determined by a few plays. The Sixers lost, in overtime, and then they lost the game where they were up by over 20. A couple of shots go in, Ben Simmons makes a couple, wiser plays down the stretch there, and this is a 3-1 series the other way. So outside of game 1, it never really felt like the Sixers were outplayed in any game. And with the talent on the 2 teams, and, of course, you have to account for the injuries that the Celtics are facing. Shane Larkin is out now for at least tonight going forward. I don't think that's the case. I think the Sixers are at least the more talented team. And, if they continue to play to their potential, they could really make this a series.
All right, so pressure's relative, especially in the NBA and the playoffs. So a question that Mike's been asking, interesting to get your take. Who has more pressure tonight, the Sixers or Boston?
That is a great question, Bill. I would say that the Sixers still have more pressure tonight. 3-1 with a home game in Game 5 is still a pretty comfortable position to be in for the Celtics. With that being said, that could flip very quickly if the Sixers are able to pull this game out and force a Game 6 back in Philly. I think at that point it's almost a complete 180, and the pressure at that point is pretty much solely on Boston to close out this series. But at this point, with the lead, the Celtics still are up comfortably in the series and have a home game. And obviously, it's win or go home for the Sixers. So while there is some pressure on the Celtics, I would say tonight more so that pressure lies on the Sixers.
If the Sixers win tonight, Michael, who are we talking about tomorrow? Who's the guy?
I think it's going to be a team effort, but I think TJ will be dominating the headlines again, Mike, just because if they're able to win again with him in the starting lineup, you would have to assume that his, whatever he brings to the floor was a big part in that. I think obviously, certainly Embiid will have to have a big game and some of the other guys, but just the fact that this change at this late point in the series, and if they're able to pull off a second straight win, and largely thanks to what TJ did, that's just it's a story that you don't hear every day, especially for a guy that for people outside of Philadelphia probably did not really even know who he was or know what kind of game
he's Mo Cheeks, damn it. He's Mo Cheeks.
That's to us he is, Mike, but I think a lot of people are just learning about him for the first time when they're watching SportsCenter yesterday morning. So, I think obviously the normal guys will need a big game from JJ. Ben has to get his stuff together, Joel. But I think TJ will continue to be the story if the Sixers can pull out another win.
At the Real Mike KB on Twitter, Michael Kaskey-Blomain. Check him out at 97.3 ESPN.com. Sixers Celtics. Tonight he appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. MKB, see you, pal.
Thanks, fellas.